Do Not God video presentation. So, Modern Mystic is talking about the brain and its function. He bases a lot of his commentary, I suppose, on some stuff in the past. Damaso he brings up, who I thought was a little bit phantasmagorical, frankly. So he's got some new guy. I forgot to look it up yet. He's reading. Well, anyway, it's still the argument still has to be made in the sense of we're arguing for a description of what it is, this activity taking place on the surface of Earth in terms of these biological organisms being animated into function through a process of material functions, okay, and it all comes down to some material functions. Now I'm arguing that what our basic function is, what our basic capacity to do now is, as human beings, is yes, we look at the world and we can, viscerally react because we have some instincts, but I don't think we have very many of those. And then we have cultural influences. You grow up in certain places in the world, and certain traditions are fun, and other traditions are stupid, and you have inverse relationships to those kind of things. You have biases. You like certain kinds of food because you were raised on it, that kind of crap. And then we have this final capacity to glean understanding of all those contexts, that I have a subjective physiology that's telling me one thing, and I have an intelligence that can tell me another thing. Like I can find a woman very attractive and beautiful, and then I can recognize that, but that's all superficial stuff, and if I'm really supposed to care about a person or be involved with a person, that involvement should be based on something a little deeper than that. And so it's unfortunate that she's very attractive and all that kind of stuff, and I'd very much like to spend time with her, and blah 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 blah. I can understand as a practical matter it won't work because she doesn't have a program that will be compatible with mine in terms of a mind, and it'll go all kinds of sideways. So I can know better. I can have understanding of a context, a circumstance. It can look like candy. It can look like the cheese on the mousetrap. I can understand there's a mousetrap. So unlike the mice, we can start identifying mice traps even when they don't have cheese on them. We can see them and recognize them. And so we can talk about reality and context and understanding things as a truth. And we can define, is the reality that Earth is made out of cheese? No, we can know that's a bullshit story. We can glean some truth out of all this and end up just being machines that are defending narratives and stories. So the stories we're telling is not irrelevant. It's not just a bunch of dogs barking. We are barking particular quality of bark. Some barks are worth listening to, some barks aren't. Some barks are informative, some barks aren't. So there's very much at stake here in terms of the human race investing in ideas and having ideas to invest in that make sense. Like going to Mars and spending $3 billion to send a stupid probe to take more pictures, one could argue is just a silly waste of resources. That those resources should be put to coronavirus or some other bullshit, but certainly not to taking the same pictures we already took. Picking up the same rocks, playing the same silly games. But anyway, I don't want to get into that argument of what function there is in this idea of exploring a universe that we really can't habitate anyway. What's the point? We already know enough. Knowing any more isn't going to help us any. Anyway, alright, so to the brain. Anyway, I'm trying to get to the point that me and the mystic have a fundamental conflict over how meaningless this all is in terms of function, whether there is a good result or a bad result that comes out of it. He doesn't seem to have any, he seems very nihilistic. He doesn't see any meaning in whether a billion people suffer or a billion people don't. Where I see a huge amount of meaning in the significance of wasting the only thing that matters in this universe, which is the experiencing of overtly obnoxious sensation, and that must be mitigated. There's nothing more precious than the sentient organism's experience. It's the only thing that has any meaning and value in the universe, and somehow he just doesn't measure that. Or he says there's nothing, that somehow the conversation, the high and barking, doesn't mean anything. And of course it means something. It's all programming. It's all written how it will take place. It's all inevitable. It's all determined already. But the point is that we're part of that mechanism. And if we don't recognize these truths of it, these things being important, and how important our own words are, and how important our own influence is, then we're missing a huge portion of the logic that allows us to function better rather than worse. It matters whether I convince you that what you do matters, or if I don't convince you. You'll behave differently based on those two notions. So it's vitally important that people understand they are an I, they are a person, and they have a role to play. And the role can be shithead, or the role can be savior. It's just a fact. You can ruin the future. You can be written into the script as the evil character who dropped the ball. Or you can be written to the script as the hero who, grabbed the baton and carried it the necessary extra miles. All right. So, brains are just reflexes. So you could say the first organism had no choice but to act based on chemistry. Okay, it had to make a chemical reaction happen. The chemicals had to move through something, and they would hit some little sensor, and that chemical reaction would say, I'm going to go left or I go right, and a little tail thing or something. So it was just, inputs come in, energy comes in, and so there's more blue energy than red, light or something. The more blue means that this went twitchy, and then the signal of that twitchiness gets sent to some other thing. It recognizes the twitchy, and it does some twitchy. So it's just action, reaction, action, reaction, action, reaction. Little tail moves. All right, so that's kind of how it started. And then it got a little more sophisticated when the neuron was invented. So when evolution fell on this very fast way to move information, then cells became devoted to just being part of the wiring of reflexes. So you have a reflex here, and then you have a reflex here, and now you could have a much quicker reaction. So this reacts, this sends the signal, and this one reacts, based on the signal. And so now these things can communicate. So the organism is made out of a certain mechanism. It's got to consume food to survive. So it has a stomach. And so that's one part of it. That's an organ that's really vital. So what I would argue is the key ingredient is where sensation came out of all of this crap, and because that's the real deal. That's the big motivator, and it's a big part of understanding how reward and punishment became part of our existence, and how ideas get stored as either positive or negative concepts. And it's all part of how you build the battleship. What it points its guns at and what it shoots is all part of getting that kind of organization correct, to identifying the enemy properly and all that stuff. So the higher end functions are all kind of dependent on these lower end mechanisms of feedback. Now he'll talk about that in this video, which is important, but he really doesn't get to what the role is. So as you're making this reflexive organism, so now we have a brain and we got neurons, and we can understand what some of it's doing. Some of it's saying heartbeat. Okay, and some of it's regulating. If the kidneys are making too much something, then the chemical reaction goes in. The brain says, make more hormone X, so the kidneys do this. But it's all reflexes. So you can all understand it's just knee jerks, right? You're just hitting your triggering mechanism. Triggers, all these triggers set up. And if X, if Y, if W, then Z. You're just getting reactions based on tripping different switches. And when all the switches are tripped, then this action happens. And so the brain is just doing a bunch of reflexes. So it's just a bunch of knee jerks, all kinds of knee jerks in here, all kinds of little knee jerks, all piled on top of each other. So you have to have 3 knee jerks line up, 3 jerks, and then that equals the Z. And, that's the basic nature of the programming. And so there's some of this brain, okay, is just wired with, now we can do a computer analogy. Some of it's wired with the program already written on the chip. Okay, the chip already has the knee jerks in it, and it can't be rewritten. It's hardwired, like maybe the difference between when you're drinking something, the sensation, and when you're eating something. And so we know not to confuse drinking and eating and breathing and stuff. So we have automatic reflexes to stop us from inhaling food, for example, or doing something else stupid. And that's written on a hard chip, okay? And then we have other chips, that are, that if you send in enough data while the organism is maturing, okay, it's writing the reflexes. So from the day you're born, it's organizing information or knee jerks based on figuring out what gravity is. And it figures out what light is. And it figures out, it starts connecting these, the mechanical dots of just functioning in this atmosphere. How much you can, how much energy it takes to move your arm up and down. All that stuff your body is starting to figure out. So it's writing it, and it will be a semi-permanent. It will be a really kind of a hard, once it's written hard. But it's the same thing as the instinct chip, essentially. I mean, your conditioning ends up being almost as hard written as your instinct chip. It's not the kind of stuff that can be reprogrammed once it's programmed. So it's hard to relearn a language. It's hard to relearn. Like if we change the gravity, it would take us time to adapt and do all these different things because our body would be full of these instincts and patterns that would be hard to fix. So this, you would also say that, your sexual identity would be in this kind of form, your conditioning, some of your food tastes, these kind of things would all be written. And so it can be rewritten, but it requires an extensive amount of flooding. It requires you to be reprogrammed. It's kind of a harsh way where you have to really do some hard work on you emotionally to rewire this harder chip. And then there's the real chip, the real life chip. And it's getting information from the instinct chip, and it gets information from the preference chip, the condition chip. But it's also being written by daily information, and then it's being written by tons of memory information over time, where you've become a white supremacist, or you've become a loop-de-dooer. You like to play loop-de-doo. You like hopscotch, shuffleboard. You're a shuffleboarder. I liked golfing, so I had a little golfing experience thing. So those experiences and those memories where you had a good time and it was good fun and it was rewarding and all that, and that's blending into this chip as we're going to process this chip and what this chip says and what this chip says and then what this memory chip says, and we're going to process it into a momentary, moment by moment experience. Like you see the pretty cat, and then you see the bad car coming, and you see the bad car is going to smush pretty cat. So first you had this, oh, pretty cat, you had happy, and then all of a sudden now you have sad and worry. So it's all those are just reflexes. You're just reflexively reacting to what you're seeing in the world and what you can identify, what you've, because of experience, you have a bunch of reflexes to say there's a huge connection between big heavy car and smush, crush, kill, destroy. You have that connection. You understand it. And then sometimes when you're in the car, you forget about that whole problem and you start acting kind of recklessly because from the inside, you don't see it from the outside. Those kind of hypocrisies will exist in your brain's capacity to recognize the truth. You're not always in the truth. You're always just in a picture of where you are at a circumstance. So your memories are very particular to your circumstance. And it's also particular to what your brain is producing as a sensation. So we're back to the stomach thing. And the fact that your brain is sends signals to your stomachs. It was important. Stomachs were the first place where this ouch thing could be important. Because the small organism, all it was a stomach, essentially. A mouth and a stomach and an ass. And that's really all it was. And the idea is don't put anything in the stomach that'll poke a hole in your stomach. Don't put anything in your stomach that'll create a chemical that'll make all your atoms fall apart. So it was really important what went in your stomach. And so clearly early on in the evolution of brain, it became important that stomachs would react. And so once we had this feeling thing, so once the brain produced a ow or a ew, ugh, produced an unpleasant sensation, something that was just it couldn't mean anything until it could be associated with something. So it existed, but it didn't have any meaning. It just existed. The brain made the first ouch, and it didn't mean anything. But then the brain, accidentally, through evolution, the ouch was happening over here, like your kidneys are functioning or your heart beating. Your brain made an ouch, but it wasn't connected to anything. It didn't mean anything. So right now your brain is creating farts, so to speak. It's not connected to anything. It doesn't mean anything. It's just little crap it does that doesn't connect it to anything. But one of those things got connected to the idea of, well, if we make an ouch when we have a signal that the stomach has something bad in it, then the organism can learn not to eat the bad thing. We can end up associating this as a memory. Ouch, okay, was you ate poison. Made ouch. Don't eat the poison. So now it's a way of protecting the organism from the negative thing. So that's where the ouch started. And once it had the ouch, it could give you little bits of ouch all day long, little aggravations, my neck's a little stiff, and I'm a little queasy. So it could give me a bunch of little ouches, and then take the ouches away. And I would say, ooh, that's a good feeling. That's really good. So when I get rid of the bad feeling is when I get the, oh, shit, I was supposed to do this, wasn't I? Sorry about that. Well, you could probably get the idea. Sorry, it's my bad. So I sort of did some of this for nothing, right? Because anyway, I think you could follow along even without the explicit map. So it's probably a good enough point. So the ouch is just a mechanical sensing. It's just the same thing as you seeing something. It's just energy in the brain, electrical stimulus, okay, that didn't have a real connection to anything, but it actually is sensed just like the eye senses light. It just happens to be that it's created. It's just created by the brain as a sense, as a perception. And it didn't mean anything until, yes, it could be connected to things. So now once the ouch was invented, you could use it in all kinds of places because of this fact that we were starting to grow memories, and the memories would be associated with a feeling. So we would associate the American flag with, yay, Americans, and we'd have this good feeling, blah, blah, blah. And then we'd grow up and find out that Americans are terrible exploiting pigs, and they killed, all kinds of civilizations and exploited people and stole their money and all kinds of bad things. And then we say, oh, American flag, ooh, not so good after all. You find out the whole revolution was just mercenaries, hired for the rich people so they could own the country. The Americans didn't want the English to be lords. They wanted to be the lords, that kind of crap. It's all kind of flawed, and there isn't anything to be all that happy about. All right, so with that context, I believe it's... So, this is all very... there's a lot to this conversation, a lot of details, brain function. But what I guess I would argue is the themes are pretty simple. So the idea is we sense, we feel. feeling is a hugely important thing to us personally. And in the sense that we all understand that if it's important to me personally, it's important to other people personally. But even more so, I could understand that I don't make a broken leg less bad by giving it to somebody else. I don't make a headache less bad as an event by giving it to somebody else. It's a bad event happening in the universe. So we can understand that, okay, the feeling thing. And that the thinking thing, again, is this much different thing of the fact that through experience we learn to associate the feelings, but not in any direct way anymore. I mean, I can say nuclear bomb, and I can think of the people with their skin peeling off at Nagasaki or something, but I don't have to have a bad feeling about it. I can just understand it as bad. So I don't have to go through a horrible feeling. I don't have to actually experience their suffering to understand their suffering as a bad thing. So I can have the word, the label, bad, and that's just associated with, well, it's like that feeling, bad thing. So I just make the word bigger and in capital letters, and I know it's a really bad, or it's just a little bit bad, and I can give it all kinds of proportion. So I've replaced the actual feeling bad with just the word bad. And now I can associate lots of concepts with this bad thing and know I don't have to feel bad, but I can understand it as bad. So I can think bad and I can think good about things. And those conclusions can be derived through logic, through actually accurately assessing the environment. That is, banging your head into a lot of trees and saying, yep, it seems like I don't go through any of the trees. All of the trees are opaque to me, and there's no point in walking into them because they're all solid trees. So I can understand theoretically, I can understand how the real world works in the sense that no point in walking through trees because you can't do it. So don't walk through trees. And all of our complex political and ideological perspectives are all just based on collecting this information about the reality and having the discourse, the argument, over each other's theories. So if somebody has a theory that I can walk through trees, or I can travel faster than light, well, then they have to defend it with some sort of reasoning that I can create a mental picture where I can understand how trees can sometimes actually be invisible trees or transparent trees, and that we can walk through them. And so then we can have all these arguments. But you have to have the arguments. You have to actually be willing to engage in the discourse, or there isn't much chance, of you gaining anything in terms of understanding where you might have made a mistake in your description. And unfortunately, the mystic has shut off communication, so he cannot benefit from learning that he may have misunderstood or misappreciated a fact in his arrangement of the facts. So I will say that the mystic is more accurate than most humans, maybe all of them, in terms of some of his capacity to grok the truth and to establish some understanding of the mechanism, but he's totally clueless in terms of understanding the important part, which is understanding that we do experience pain and suffering as individual machines, and that pain and suffering is the only thing in the universe that has reason for us to panic, that we should be panicked. If somebody proposes to do an experiment where they're going to subject millions of feeling organisms to horrific, horrible torture, we should be panicked. It's something to worry about. It's something to devote our attention to preventing. And that is necessary for us to be functioning in any kind of rational, decent way. We are not rationally and decently reacting. We are not logically or intelligently reacting to the universe if we are indifferent about outcomes. Okay.
Hello, me. Quickie, this is meant to be. Oh, I don't even need to go to that. Right, it's only quick. Comment overnight.
So I do have it sped up. So he says quick video, but yes, 17 minutes isn't quick for him. But go ahead.
I had video developing in here, but Barda Dude's comment this morning is prompting this video.
So a commenter has provoked him to make a different video.
I should really read it because it was quite a nice comment. Video comment, there it is. Fundamentally, we have a life thing that is what one is experiencing. Make the most of it.
So again, making the most of it is recognizing that the outcome matters and that you have a role to play in the outcome. In my opinion, there's no other way to make that sentence mean anything. The only way making the best of it is you have to have first be a good battleship. You have to target the right enemy, and you have to decisively and correctly make that enemy impotent. You have to shoot it in the nuts. You have to stop it from being an enemy. And that is your objective here, is to fight for a better future. The future is gigantic compared to your existence. It's the only thing of merit at stake, and you have to maximize your potential to mean something, or you're letting the future down horribly. You're sentencing it to doom because you don't want to screw your bolt into the side of the Titanic. Maybe there was one bolt that wasn't screwed all the way in and the boat wouldn't have sunk if that one was all the way in. That kind of thing. We all got to do our job. And our job isn't to pretend nothing matters and we should be completely distracted by our little horny chip or our little hungry chip or our little I want to play video games, I want to do this, I want to do that. If we're paying attention to those chips, we're not making the most of our existence. If you're here just wanking, forget it. You got to do more than that. Wank, but don't make it a don't make it a profession.
You can. It is what it is. Que sera, sera. Because he's learning Spanish. Right. To me.
So he likes that. That stuff gives him a happy feeling, which that's where our main bone of contention is. Because to me, that's the most offensive thing you can do to another human being is to say, just stay in the Borg. Just be a useless spin round and circle pawn. Don't play chess. See, it's so funny because this guy likes playing chess. He likes understanding strategy. He likes understanding careful manipulation to control how something works. If he does a project, he does it well. He engineers it. He manufactures the right outcome. And yet he doesn't think our role as individuals is to see that as our function. He doesn't think it's going to enhance the function of a human being if they actualize that objective. Now, either because he thinks it's futile, like there's no amount of persuasion that can overcome the evil, the moron noise that is going to consume anything. So there's no point in making the symphony because it takes a lot of work and a lot of practice, and it'd be more fun not to learn how to play the violin and not to learn how to play the piano, not to learn how to play the drums and all that stuff. So don't bother being a better human being and a more powerful human being because your power will be of no use against the giant Goliath of noise that is going to consume it all. So maybe that would be the analogy. But he won't say those things overtly. He won't say overtly, I have assumed the good guys can't win. The white hatters have no chance, and therefore I'm just telling everybody, be a thief, because thieves win in the end. So he's predicting failure, and he won't say that's what he's predicted. He won't say or point why he thinks the future doesn't need people who give a shit. He thinks the future is just fine with everybody not giving a shit. And that part is just so fuck you to me. I mean, that's just, wow. You might as well be Hitler. You might as well be the enemy then. I mean, if you're going to open the door for the goddamn enemy, you might as well be the fucking enemy.
That's a plea from the heart. And I see, I'll do it this way. I see a Barda dude comment, and my heart is lifted. I see a Declan comment.
Yeah, so he's seeing this moron, this stupid, doopy, Borgy, just live out your life, la la la, eat as many candy bars as you can. I mean, more like personal stuff. You could point to the mystic and you say, look, he learned a lesson. You know, he ate a lot of cheese and had to have bypass surgery. And he hasn't even made a statement like where he'd say to other people, you know, you ought to watch what you eat because it's a pain in the ass to have to go through this process of cleaning up the mess you make. So don't make the mess. You know, I just give you some advice. Just avoid making messes that are hard to clean up. Little messes, okay, a little dust, a little crumpled piece of paper, but don't get the glue or the sticky shit or the, you know, the stuff that really makes a mess. Don't open that bottle if you can avoid it, okay, because it is a pain in the ass to clean it up. But he doesn't even send messages like that.
And my stomach churns. Now,
so he's talking about now he sees something that, like me watching a mystic video, my stomach turns. You know, this obnoxious glib crap. Okay, yes, it's all determined, but we're part of the determinism. We're actually building the Titanic right now, and you're saying nobody pay any attention to what the fuck you're doing, and I'm like, what the fuck? You're guaranteeing the shipwreck. You know, you're just guaranteeing it by giving up. No, let's all pay attention to what we're doing. Oh, I mean.
Yes, I'm reading Damasio again, new Damasio, but it's updated of the old stuff. And we've been through this, that there is input to the brain, and the brain, to give nuance to...
So it's not to give nuance, it's to give direct and meaning. So it's not just a nuance, it's to, you know, so I'm not just picking on words, I know. I mean, you know, he gets this, he's just using the word nuance, and it's really not nuance, it's to give meaning. It's to give it direct implication. To give it the word bad, to make it mean something. It's not just nuance, it's to really put it in a category. Good, bad. I mean, it's an important nuance.
What's happening needs feelings. The way to get feelings is that one part of the brain activates, actually tightens the stomach or makes the heartbeat increase or whatever it might be. And another part...
Right, but we know it does it also in a complicated way, right? It doesn't do it by direct process. It does it by a lot of indirect process. So the chemistry gets fucked up, your mood, your vision, your this, your that. It starts distorting all kinds of stuff with all kinds of drugs. It starts pumping into you and fucks you up. You know, disorients your function with these signals, okay, that are supposed to deter you from even having the conversation sometimes because it's so unpleasant. You're being deterred, okay? You're being persuaded to evade.
To the brain, feels that, registers that as a sensation, and has a linked naming for that sensation, which could just be bad or worry or fear.
Right. So the sensation isn't worry, but the complex arrangement of sensations is what we call worry. So I'm just adding my nuance that I think these are important little distinctions sometimes to make sure we understand what the vocabulary is saying. So there's a bunch of physiological knee jerks, and sometimes they're not very perfect, and that's the whole point. It's not a perfect arrangement of badness. So it doesn't get it loud enough, or it's not loud enough. I mean, it's not very coherent sometimes in how your physiology is reacting. It's sloppy sometimes, and so but it's just the idea that it's reacting, and it's attempting in this crude manner to say bad, but at the same time there's little pieces that are saying good. So it has this mixture of oil and water in terms of sensations, and the ones you're really going to feel are the oil. You know, the bad parts are hard to overcome with the good sensation.
Or loathing, or that would all be for Declan. Sorry, Declan. I'm exaggerating a few just to make a point. And for Bardadude, how do we feel good? I don't know how we feel good. How do you feel good? A lightening of the head. I don't know how it actually feels, but it's an instant.
So that's a part where a ball really dropped there, because how we feel good is by being relieved of our tension. So we're already tense all the time. All the time if you go to do this meditating thing, you might realize it. Just how uncomfortable you are when you start, because you do have a lot of these, like, something wrong with my muscle over here, and oh, my arm is really, my rotator cuff is completely fucked. And, you're feeling you're noticing how much tension you really are on, how tired or fatigued some of your muscles might be, how stiff or arthritis-y your fingers are getting, some kind of crap that's just, that background noise. And if somebody could give you something to relieve all of those annoying things, that's the good feeling. Ah, the whipping stopped. Oh, the hair is clean and everything's wonderful because the whipping stopped. So that's how I would suggest is a good way to understand that the brain is only using one mechanism, the negative. And by removing the negative, it gives you the illusion of the positive. I think it's an important fact of the function.
Thing. So what the body does is make a physical bodily happening and then registers that physical bodily happening that has a word with it or a sensation with it that is felt as well. So we feel it as a feeling of dread when we see a Declan comment, or a feeling of lift of goodness when we see a Barda dude comment.
Right. So we even get depressed. I mean, it happens to me all the time, right? Because I say, oh, it's so depressing. You can't convince these people of anything. They won't stay on the subject. They get personally offended in some sort of bullshit way. They can call you an asshole, but you can't call them one because they called you an arsehole, or they, called you a butticus orifice hole, because they said it in some sort of different vocabulary. They didn't exactly say exactly the same thing, like, you're fucking nuts. But anyway, so yeah, all that nuance is just so, this is so irritating, so tedious. I have to obey all these fucking goddamn rules to have this conversation. Oh, I just said fucking. You can't do that because some brain is going to get all hysterical. Oh, God. The word just totally blew my brains away. Oh, yeah. And you're like, what the fuck? You're not capable of dealing with reality if you can't even deal with letters in a certain order. And they're going to cause you all kind of disambiguation, and your whole brain is going to fall apart. It's hilarious nonsense.
Or you can imagine it for anything else out there in the world. You've got to phone your mother. Mixed feelings. You'll get both. You want to speak to her because you love mummy, but God, it's always hard work. That's all.
Yeah, I don't know. I agree. It was always hard work, and the love thing is just, you admire and you respect. Maybe you do this, you do that, but, I don't know. This love word is just kind of, I don't know. I don't have any use for it, actually. It's just way too ambiguous. Yeah.
Sort of thing. And there is the physical appearing in the body. What did I want to say this for? Okay, yeah, because I got from Barda Dude there, it's a plea from the heart to say what I went to yesterday, to me, was totally reasonable. It would elevate me. It would give me good feelings because I have no cognitive dissonance about what I said.
Right, which is unfortunate because you don't allow any cognitive dissonance because you don't allow anybody to point out where you're wrong. And so that's the part where you're evading, the whole process, which is not just your brain figuring out what the counter argument is, because that's not always the best. You really do have to hear the counter argument from other people because sometimes you're just not appreciating that there's a very good counter argument and you've ignored it because you've chickened out.
Because it's what I said, and it's what I wanted to say, so I felt good about it. But the cognitive different.
Right, and that all has to just do with the fucking programs, right? So we're all programmed to say, this is my mission, this is what I'm trying to accomplish. We have goals involved. We're here, and we're saying, well, did I do something that's really conducive to the goal? So I would argue the same thing about my video. Some videos I say, just how can this video fail? I'll end up watching it 6 or 7 times because I'll say, this is a great video. How could this video possibly fail? It makes these great arguments. It's right there in their face. How can they possibly reject the statements made in this video? It's not possible. So yeah, I'm feeling really good about the video, but the results are just, dismal. And you're just like, shit, how could that have failed? That was such a good swipe with my sword. I mean, I just lopped his head off. How is he still standing up? It's not possible.
dissonance. The cognitive dissonance thing comes where you get, you should know your Kahneman by now, your fast thinking and your slow thinking. Your fast thinking is based off these feelings. The body throws this feeling together of, as soon as that's...
Right, so that's what we call intuition, and that's the reinforced ideas. So we have reinforced ideas like trees are solid, but people also have reinforced ideas where God must be part of my philosophy. Or they have a reinforced idea about some other notion of reality, like faster than light, travel is possible. You know, because they don't know enough about physics to know, no, it really isn't. There's just no room for it at all. No room for any possibility. All of physics would have to be something entirely different than what we know it to be for it to be possible. Well, anyway, but they have trees, and they're not trees. They're bullshit. So they have a bunch of these mission statements, these goal statements that don't have anything to do with reality. They're just not true statements. They're bullshit. And that's the unfortunate part, is people are saying, I'm getting somewhere, I'm winning, I'm getting to the finish line, I'm getting to the win line. And it's completely an illusion. It's the lose line. And they're just seeing it wrong because they drew a wrong conclusion about what this line is. It's the you wasted your time, asshole line.
That's its quick response team in action. It bangs something into the body. The body recognizes that actual bodily thing happening, the tightening of the gut, and links it to a feeling. And that feeling is...
Right, but I mean, all of that visceral stuff, we're totally capable of overcoming in an instant by just saying, oh, it's only one sentence, let me read the rest of the paragraph. So we mitigate against the tragedy that we're seeing heading for us by hoping it'll get better. So as soon as we throw a little hope in, oh, now I got some chance that he's still going to get it. I got some, so we'll still be able to control the failure and the meaning of the failure. And then once you've done this a few hundred times, which is surprising, right? The mystic has done this a few hundred times, and he has such a thin skin. And, clearly you understand how the process works, that you're going to have to endure some of these slings and arrows. And so okay, I just eat that. I'll just eat that. It won't kill me. I'm not going to die. It's not a big tragedy. I'm not going to bleed to death. It doesn't even hurt that much. So eventually, even though the thing is still bad, you've done it so many times, so what? Go ahead. I'm already used to it. So go ahead, do it again, so what? So you get used to failure. You get used to it didn't work. You get used to your disappointment. You get used to all of that crap, and you learn how to eat it and not throw up.
Got more chance of getting into, let's call it the conscious. And if it gets into the conscious, it gets to the top of the pile of actionable things to do, and it's more likely to get actioned on. It's a shortcut that a body, there will be always fighting going on to get the action done.
Right. So we had this conversation years ago about dwarves, and we have these different personalities, and it doesn't matter whether there's 70 or 700 or 7 million, and they're all voting with each other essentially, and that's how something gets to the top. Most all of your other themes have to sort of say, there's nothing to see here, I don't need to vote, I don't care, go ahead, go to the top. So a thing wants to get to the top, or it's heading in that direction. And as long as there isn't something that sees it as a threat, or stupid, or retarded, or something else, it doesn't get knocked down by something, then it will get there. And so it's really, the fight could be described in lots of ways. So yeah, it really doesn't matter how we describe that fight. It'd be interesting to have it right, to get the right metaphor. Those will always be interesting conversations to figure out how the democracy of your multi-personalities actually do the process of their democracy or their republic or whatever the fuck it is. How they decide, how they judge, how the judging is done to decide what at this very moment I'm thinking about and what I'm talking about. My brain has decided an agenda and a course of action, and that course of action was decided upon. The brain agreed in a sense, because at this time I'm feeling no dissonance. I'm feeling no conflict in my brain about what I'm going to say or how I'm going to say it, beyond saying, well, maybe I won't use good enough words. Maybe I won't use the perfect sentence, and somebody will get the misunderstanding because I didn't use the perfect words. So it has some awareness of this construction. But just understand, it's constructing all of this stuff in milliseconds inside of my brain. It's doing all this debating and judging. It's judging the sentences I'm building right now and figuring out whether it's a good structure or a bad structure. Did I say it the way it needs to be said? You know, all of that's being done completely without my involvement. Okay, the part of me I call the I that feels doesn't know what the hell that's doing. It's just saying, wow, okay, I feel pretty good about that. But I can't see any of that with my conscious eyes. I can only experience it. And I'm saying that experience means something where he's not. That's the barking. And there was a process that decided how I bark. And that process has elements in it that have to do with integrity because they have to do with knowledge. There's parts of me that have knowledge enough to make these sentences. It's smart enough to make them. It's experienced enough with concepts and their manipulation. And it's figured out how to structure these sentences. And all of that is critically important in the process of me conveying knowledge to somebody else, or me inspiring, or musing, or in suggesting, or giving an inkling of an impression of slightly pushing them, okay, in some direction where they will take more notice of their effect on the world, more notice of what they're doing and how they're doing it and why they're doing it. More notice of things like, well, am all I doing is reacting? I mean, this is another philosophical brain subject, is the fact that you can only control, in a sense, your reaction to the world. That's all we have, is how we react to the world. So if you're in a fight with somebody, or in a conflict, or in something else, all you have is your capacity to react. And so you can either fuel the damage, you can pour more gasoline on the fire, or you can pour water on it, or you can pour CO2 on it. You can do something to stop it from being a disaster by not reacting, by just saying, oh, I'll eat that one. And that knowledge is very valuable. Now, you can't use it. I have found it difficult to ignore all the visceral insult kind of reflexes. So somebody insults me in some hurt my feelings way. Yes, I get visceral in terms of fighting back. But I also know, isn't that how this thing gets out of control? Isn't that just how it ends up being a mess? So if I can avoid my reaction, I can do a real positive action. The most positive actions we are capable of almost is not wrongly reacting to what the world is doing. Reacting carefully and thoughtfully. So that what I would say is a life lesson that comes out of all of this talk of understanding your brain as just a knee-jerker. It's just knee-jerking. A million jerks, but I mean, it comes out, it's just knee-jerk, knee-jerk, knee-jerk. And that because we have this intelligent stuff, we can use these key words. Careful, careful, big important word. Be careful. Be professional. Be responsible. Be accountable. We can have these words that are just vital. If you understand those words, they're vital in the function of your brain in composing your reaction that will do the most good rather than the most harm. And that's missing from the mystic's analysis, in my opinion.
For its particular, whichever committee's deciding in the brain, that's what the brain is. Hundreds of committees trying to get their project forward, their boondoggle forward, and if it can get hold of the bodily feeling thing.
So again, he calls it a boondoggle. And see, these are the parts of the conversation where he's saying he's ridiculing anyone who takes life seriously, and that's part of his ridicule. And yet he'll claim he hasn't thrown an insult, that there's nothing for me to react to. There's nothing for a person who knows this isn't boondoggle. Okay, I mean, not raping the woman isn't a boondoggle idea, okay, versus raping. Eating too much, all these little inequities and these little crimes, these little murders we commit. Not committing some of them is a very good idea. So all the ideas are not boondoggle. The idea of making, being a useful human being is not a boondoggle idea. And so that's where he's gotten, that's, like I said, he's offending right to the core of all of my ideology of value. He's insulting it to its core. He's calling my kid ugly and stupid. And then he says, don't offend me. Don't fight back. Don't react to my insult with an insult. Don't give me what I gave you. I should be polite in accepting his insult. What? So I'm just saying, as smart as the mystic is, he's a duplicitous hypocrite.
It gets their thing pushed to the top. Okay. So yesterday, watching my video, you lot, mostly, I could just tell it on the thumbs up, basically. I'd gone too far. Calling you dogs. Now, obviously, I didn't call you dogs. If anybody, for the ones that were understanding what I was saying, and I explained it reasonably enough.
I know, but you're doing the same thing. You're just saying that everything our brain is doing has no merit or integrity. You're saying that when Martin Luther King said, judge a man based on the content of his character, not the color of his skin, he wasn't saying anything meaningful. That those words are the same as kill the niggers. That there just isn't any distinction between smart and stupid. That there's no distinction between true and false. And for you not to get that is amazingly depraved. Sorry, to insult what intelligence is capable of. And the fact that we are in the process of building intelligence. That's exactly what we're an incremental, but substantial cog in the wheels of intelligence turning. And those wheels will turn much quicker if we're smart quicker. If we get the truth quicker. It's all vitally important to sparing the unnecessary waste of wasted suffering. We get to the promised land much, much, much quicker by walking the smart road, not the stupid, twisted, irrational, sloppy, reckless road. We have to follow some stars of concept. Truth matters. Facts matter.
Knows that I'm not calling you dogs, but there will have been a lot of stomach reactions to the barking like a dog, because barking like a dog, in the way we have all learned, it's a bit old-fashioned now, you dog, but we've got it from movies. We know if you're being likened to a dog, it's bad. Everybody, except me, because I'm so used to using it now, and one or two of you who know kind of what I'm talking about won't take it as an insult. But most...
So again, there's no point, because you're insulting the concept of intelligence. You're saying it's just another form of the same rubbish, when clearly all thoughts aren't equal. All ideas aren't equal. All concepts, all declarations, all assignments are not equal. All ideologies are not equal.
People would have the tendency to take it as a physical, it's an insult, and it comes as an insult. So I've insulted you, or even talking to what you're doing as the splishing and sploshing of waves. Now, that is an insult as well, because you get cognitive dissonance with the stories that you are used to. I won't go too deep. That you are used to. The stories that you are used to is that you are generating these stories. Yeah? Now, I'm telling you that the brain is generating...
So again, let's understand, it has nothing to do with that. I'm clearly aware of the fact that everything I'm saying has been manufactured by my life experience, that there's no I that creates anything. I can just mix things. My brain mixes them. I don't control how they're mixed. I don't control whether I become attached to the word truth. My life experience makes me attached to the word truth. the fact that I, delivered newspapers as a kid and watched my dog die and do this and do that. And truth became important, and the word context became important, and the word understanding that there's a future and you got to invest in it. All those concepts became important through life experience, and I didn't make the concepts. I revealed, my brain put the ingredients together, and the ingredients said, these are important concepts. Mixing it, this is the cake of concept it made. So I didn't do it. But it's very different to say when people are mixing ingredients and they're mixing I selfishly want, and I selfishly want, and I selfishly want, and that's all they're mixing. To call that the same process when they're mixing their own delusions, and they're not allowing any facts in, and they're not allowing any context and any appreciation for the importance of their function and the fact that there are other feeling beings in the world and all of that crap, those two barkings processes cannot be called the same thing. They're fundamentally different processes in the sense one of them has some realistic chance of producing something beneficial to the human race, beneficial to the future, a good tightening of the bolt, and one is the absence of the bolt. It's that big a difference. And you just can't say it's all dog barking. Yes, it's all mixing. And we're all just mixing bowls. But there are bowls that are shitty, cracked, crooked, bent. And there are bowls doing a really good job of mixing and being very fair to the ingredients and doing it really well. Just as you do your garden well, just as you do all of your stuff well. There's a huge difference from me just saying, oh, it makes no difference. I'll just say you're no different than the slob, okay? The drunken slob walking out with a cigar and, spitting on the compost and say, there, I did my job. Come on.
These stories and putting an I in them. So, in that, the way I'm saying it, the brain generates a story and puts the I in it. You call sploshing of waves, there's no insult.
Okay, so the whole brain theater is just that, the brain theater. All of it's a theater. The projector's fake, the screen's fake, and you, the person sitting there looking at it, is all synthetic. That is, there are no players that actually look like that. But the brain has functions that create exactly those things. Those synthetic characters are created. There's a you that's doing the feeling. He's sitting in the chair. Everything he thinks and everything he reacts to and everything happening is the theater, is the projector and the screen. Okay, and he just sits there and watches his brain function. We're just watching ourselves react to the world. We're not doing the action. There's no I did it, I wrote it, I thought of it, I. Okay, none of that's happening because we're just victims. We're just tied in the chair. We can't do a damn thing but react by feeling. By enduring the conscious experience. All we do is endure it. We can't control it. It's controlled by all the subconscious themes and ideas and the rudimentary chips that react. And that's all there is. But this really is a battle. It's just like the selfish gene is about the fact that, the little pieces of code are really doing the evolving. Well, what's really doing evolving between human beings now in the modern world, what's really evolving is knowledge. We're just the vessels for a narrative, for a story, for a description of reality. We're just the vessels fighting it out to prove the validity of the memes.
When you think, there's no real thinking, but when you...
It's just these statements just don't mean anything. I mean, the thinking thing is the one thing we can really trace is a bunch of reflexes. That's the one where, yes, there's all these symbolic connections, and it figures out, your brain does all of the calculations and sees the connection between the word bad and the thing, or the word slippery, or the word shiny, and all these, it's making all those connections. So that's thinking is a real thing. Come on.
You have, your brain is creating a story that there's a you, there is actually a you, that's what you think. That's what your programming is.
So you don't have to call it a you, but I'm obviously it's an individual computer that manifests through the brain this device capable of sensing and feeling and thinking. So there is a you in the sense that there is a device that's doing this. And it's not your device, and it's not the tree, and it's not the desk. It's a separate little clump of matter that's performing, the creation of the theater. So there's no point in saying it's not a me, or saying it doesn't have an identifiable name that you couldn't point to the robot. Now, the idea is the robot is just a programmed robot. He's not doing anything creative. He's just doing what he's been programmed by his experience to do. But there's no point in saying he's not a robot. You're not calling him, that's Robbie, and that's Roby, and that's Blinky, and Twinkie. There's no point in not naming him. They are different, the robots. They're functioning very different. I mean, if you want to just say there's no you, there's just poo and doo-doo and smart person. If you want to just call all the other dumb people doo-doo, that's okay with me.
You think you are generating the stories, and I is just an accurate description of what's happening. You are generating stories. And we can't go back into what the fuck's a you. It's obviously...
It's just your brain, but your brain has a unique configuration. Each brain is configured differently. So they all have a different function. There's no such thing as it's the same battery, right? We're not just batteries and it has the same label and the same goop in it and the same, Our differences are important differences. They're not unimportant. The difference between the psycho killer and the, antivirus creator, very big differences between the function of the objects. And no point in saying it's all just battery. It's all just a human. No, not really. Some work good, some work shitty.
As part of the story. It's the way I'm saying it, which is perfectly what we call right in our normal world. But it is right, but it doesn't fit with your history of stories. Your history of stories that is a you that generates the stories about you.
So again, he's still doing the really simple determinism argument. And I think he should just step beyond that and just say the word determinism. Okay, you're not going to escape your determinism. You're programmed by your genetics, your nurturing, and then your life experience, your exposure to ideas, knowledge, and wisdom, what TV shows you watch, what commercials you hear. All that stuff is going to decide what you become. And that's all that decides. And there's nothing else to decide. Your brain doesn't decide who you are going to be. You are made by your life experience, period. Okay, we're done with that. The idea that we would still call it a you because there's obviously somebody conscious sitting in the you seat. There's obviously me sitting in this consciousness. You're not sitting in it. I'm sitting in it. You're sitting in your conscious seat. That's just a fact. If there's 100 rabbits, there's more consciousnesses than there's one rabbit. They add up. They multiply. They're real seeds. They're real things. And there's no point in saying it's one thing because it doesn't work like that. It's not accurate.
So when I say no, it's the brain that generates stories and puts you in it. It's the cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance gives you a feeling in the stomach and a tightening in the chest, maybe even a headache. But a dude who's just what we call a naturally nice guy says, fundamentally, we have a life. And what he's saying, he's the sort of person here now going in and saying, look, let's calm down. Let's all just live, and we're all human. We've all got this experience. Make the most of it. We've only got one.
So that's absolute mush. And this is the mush that he says, oh, the human's doing it right now. He's totally ignoring any of these real concepts of understanding what's going on in this universe, and he's nailed it because he's figured out it's just about your stupid consciousness being happy. No, that's not the answer at all. The future is huge. Again, everything depends on it. We are the road to the future. And if we're giant potholes, the wagon's going to break and it's going to go off the road and it's just going to be a mess. It's going to be a tragedy. We'll make the difference. Tragedy, failure, or success in terms of efficiency. We're going to decide how efficiently the future exists. We're deciding right now in these conversations. A vital thing is at risk. And these glib assholes are saying, yes, just live in your moments. Just find your peace. That's your only obligation here. You don't have any obligation to be the road. Well, you do, because that's just the fact of our lives. There's no other way to look at it. We will make it. We're responsible for it. We're going to cause it.
And life, let's enjoy it. That's his way of calming himself and trying to calm others, but really calming himself due to the cognitive
No, it's his way of running away from the facts. That all of this is vitally important, and we're all doing it so fucking sloppily and with so little attention to detail and so little attention to pragmatic, practical fact. Just keep borrowing money. It's okay. It works forever. Credit cards are infinite.
dissonance, that he wants to keep his stories gelling so they don't go bing, bing when I speak. Because his stories, obviously, it's the way we've been brought up, are all, as I say, it's him generating a story about himself. That's what the normal thing is. There's a Bardadude that generates these stories about Bardadude and his Bardadude's history. When I'm saying obviously.
And all of these stories can be argued and defended as real or unreal, realistic or unrealistic. You can tell a 3-pig story, you can tell a 3 by my story, and then you can go a 14 gremlin story. Now, there's a huge difference between the blind mice and the pigs and the gremlins, right? Because the gremlins is a huge new leap in putting something in here, right? So that story is sort of horseshit. Let's fuck that. Because it doesn't even have something piggy and mousy. It's not even getting close to a good metaphor. And then we can understand that, yes, humans are more than pigs and mice. The pigs in the story are really, people. Let's just make them people in the story. Why are we using pigs in the first place? Just make them people and point out the difference between the lazy asshole, the cheap asshole, and the asshole that actually survives because he does the work required to do it right, to do it necessary to the accomplishment the task you wish to accomplish. You don't show up on D-Day with, plastic guns. You don't show up to win the war, with whatever, in your sandals, and carrying a beach umbrella. That's not going to do it.
There's a Bardadude brain that generates stories and puts Bardadude in those stories, and one of the stories is that Bardadude actually generates the stories. The bottom line, if you
So again, he's calling all the stories stories, and not all of the stories my brain are telling are just stories. Some of them are very disciplined, very fact-based, very and again, I find them almost oppressive in the sense that I'm compelled to be obedient to this task, this obligation that I've recognized. So this doesn't have anything to do with my personal blah, 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 and my little narrative about who I am and what I am on planet Earth, or whether I feel accomplished or unaccomplished or any of that. It doesn't have anything to do with that. And not to make a distinction between these silly stories that are just fucking bullshit about whether you're going to have sex with your neighbor's wife, some silly narrative, versus the story of what did your life add up to? How many people did you indirectly or directly rape? How much harm did you directly or indirectly cause? What damage did you do to the future because you couldn't pay attention to turning that bolt 2 more turns?
You're insulted, is that I'm promoting you. Basically, from what we now know from modern the cinema, the movies, you say that you're the writer of the story. I say no, there is a writer of the story, that's the brain, and you're the...
Right. So what? This is the simple part, right? So just say that part is one simple part. that we're just constructed by our experience. We don't create. We just, our brain just stirs the mixture with a spoon that's its own shape, based on how we were treated as a kid. The spoon is shaped, the bowl is shaped, and the ingredients come in based on what we will allow in, what we will tolerate as being ingredients, and then we mix them and come up with a truth. And obviously people are distorting all kinds of elements of this mixing thing to avoid making a real cake. They want the cake to always be what's in it for me. And that's all they think about, and that's the extent of what they're mixing, is what's in it for me.
Star of the story. I'm promoting you to star when you think you're the writer. And there was another story, yeah, it is a story, but see if I can get it.
So I don't think the correct perspective is to see us as either one. I would call us the victim of the movie. Okay, we're being chained to the chair, and we must watch ourselves go through this process of being alive and trying, quote unquote, to endeavor to persevere or make the best of it or blah, 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 blah.
Click. The Dino one. I'm on the wrong place. So I'll leave it there because I wanted to keep this short. But that's it. I'm promoting you all. So you can feel a light, heady feeling of you've got your promotion. You can go to the lavatory and go, yes, I've been promoted to star of the story, as opposed to just writer of the story. I see what I remember what the comment was yesterday.
And again, the story, your individual narrative, is just one of the very valuable narratives that are going on at the same time you're on this earth. 1 trillion other sensitive organisms are right now experiencing their existence. All of those things have an interest in not being tortured. All of us can understand that their torture would be a bad thing, that if we could prevent any of it, it would be worth preventing if it doesn't take any more work than this. But even this, 1 trillion times, is going to hurt. But we all should raise our hands saying, yes, that would be good. Okay, stop things from being tortured. Definitely a good idea.
Okay, so I'll go on a bit. I don't think the fire will go out. Anyway, I'll light it up again if it does. Basically, somebody said, sorry, I can't remember who wrote it. Does this make any difference? Is it Dino? Does this make any difference? In other words, if me telling you what I think is right and my story is accepted, that we all then become the star of the show and not the writer of the show. Yeah, but will it make any difference? Can we still, like Bardadu says, get on with our lives and enjoy it? But the question is, will it make any difference? Does it matter? And again, I think it's just another way of trying to shake off this cognitive dissonance that is being felt, because my story is irrefutable.
So now he's just going through the process of rationalizing the "it doesn't matter" answer. When it's just a rationalization. The facts are, it's just obvious. You're experiencing how much it matters. You know how much it matters that you're not tortured. So why are you pretending it doesn't matter when other sentient organisms are tortured? Of course it matters. And of course, everything we do will decide how much torture is endured. Those are just the facts. So of course it matters that people understand these conversations and understand how they are robots and how their story is really a pile of, most of it is just crap. Very little of the story is about my mission, about my obligations, about all that stuff. And that my focus is awful hard for me to take my focus off of me, and put it on world, future. It's hard to make those things important, and that's why fundamentally we fail to function in any kind of decent manner. And that's why the whole game is just stupid to play, and all of those, it goes there. And that's the conversation he won't have, because it has something called value and judgment in it, and he won't engage in any conversation about value and judgment, except he will judge people who insult him. So that's it. So if you disagree with him, you've insulted him, and therefore you must be punished. But nothing else on this planet needs to be punished. So, clearly a huge a huge gap, a huge piece of bad chip. The chip is totally burnt and broken. You know, the part of the chip that's supposed to get this part of the truth right, and it's just gone. And so he has all this other stuff, all this other good information, all this other good logical function, but when it comes to this one point, it's all burnt chip.
Quite frankly, obviously right. So people are going like this. There's cognitive dissonance, as in there's the mystic story that I'm saying on YouTube. You can't attack it because it's basically obviously right, but you've got a lifetime of stories that kind of say it's wrong. You say that you're the writer of the story, and I say you have been written in as the star of the story. Okay, so would it matter if in generations to come people flocked over to my way of...
So obviously, again, it's so obvious because you could just sit here and utter a sentence and you already know I didn't write it. So you already know you're not writing the story because I didn't write any of this stuff. You know, it's coming out of my mouth, I'm saying it. It's got real good pointed, you know, logic. And I didn't have anything to do with it. I didn't do it. So I already know I'm just here to do the feeling part. I'm not here to do anything about all the other crap that's taking place in the brain. The rest of the stuff happening in the brain's doing that. And the only part it's really letting me in on is this part. I can hear me talking, but I didn't see me talk. I didn't see me make any of that. And I certainly am not seeing any of the stuff that's making me feel. I'm just the victim. I'm just here to be the mixing bowl. I'm just here for the ingredients to have a place to splash. But I don't get to see any of the mixing. I don't get to see any of the baking. I don't get to see any of it. I don't have anything to do with any other part of the process than the raw ingredient of words and feelings, my reactions, my sensations splashed into the bowl. That's it. That's the extent of my participation as a me, as a, you know, consciousness. But clearly I can associate the mixing bowl with me. It is my mixing bowl. I don't see how it does it, but I know my bowl is doing it. My bowl made this sentence. My bowl has a worldview. My bowl understands, you know, quantum mechanics in a better way. My bowl's doing that. It's my bowl. Yeah, I don't have anything to do with it. I didn't make it. I didn't create the bowl. But it is my bowl, damn it.
Thinking about it, that you're the star of the story and not the writer. And as I wrote in a comment for people who don't go back to comments, yes, it would, as in it matter, as in things would change. We are the product of at least 5,000 years of kind of God and soul thinking. That's what we are. All are the stories that we have been born.
Oh, okay, so that's all crap. That has nothing to do with this, okay? Some of the worst, crappy, shittiest humans on Earth are the ones who haven't lived that narrative, who don't believe in any of that narrative, who attach themselves to no part of that narrative. So that's not the you know, that doesn't have to be in this conversation. Most of the people listening to you, Mystic, I don't think are, you know, fanatic Christians. You know, I don't think they're trapped in some sort of archaic religious dogma. Okay, so I think this is another bullshit evasion, you know, to implicate that all ideas are of a religious nature, that it's all just some made-up dogma, and that we aren't really engineering the truth, that we don't make better and better airplanes, and we don't make better and better everythings. As we learn more knowledge, we construct a better and better story. And there are stories that are way up on the ladder, and there are stories that are way down on the ladder. And clearly the people you're talking to are already halfway up the ladder. So let's not pretend they're in some basement and they need to have it explained to them, you know, that they're just barking religion. Come on. All right, we only got 12 minutes done, but you know, it's enough of a first shot. We'll take some more shots in the future and continue. It's got 3 other videos. I think it's all good fodder. It's all good feedback. It's, you know, even though it's not feedback to me, the fact that he's feedbacking to anybody gives us some indication of where it's going. And again, in the end, The only utility any of this knowledge has is if the knowledge makes us better at functioning. And I would argue the only function that matters is your function in the war of ideas, because that's where all the value is. That's where that's freeing the slaves. That's liberating the concentration camps. You know, that's victory looks like that. Victory doesn't look like I spun around in circles and accomplished nothing. All right. So, till the next time, and such, and so forth and whatnot. Yeah, that's enough.